This is the Not So Korean podcast, and I am Jason Verney.
And this is Timothy Ohm.
In this podcast series, we talk to one another, and sometimes with special guests, about what we know about Korea,
what we don't know about Korea,
what we want to know about Korea,
and occasionally what we don't want to know about Korea.
Recording live from UK's Koreatown itself, an area in and around New Malden. Yes, that's the largest Koreatown and Korean community in Europe. Let's start this episode off with a quick summary of the last few days the things we've been up to. So, Tim, what have you been up to?
Well, I think you know what I've been up to because
Yes.
you were there as well. So we did some filming for the Korean British Cultural Exchange, also known as KBCE.
Yes.
And so we were filming basically what is a hanbok fashion show. And hanbok is traditional Korean clothes. And so we did this with 4 models, was it?
Yeah, it's 4 of them all together. Yes, that's right. 4, I think, and maybe the person from the KBC. Yeah, it's 4.
So
5.
basically we just filmed them showing off or modeling their outfits, various hanbok, which were very beautiful. And I mean, you can talk a bit more about that.
I agree. Obviously, I was just prompting with that. So, I found it really interesting. We're going to cover this in another episode because there's a lot to talk about regarding the hanboks that we saw. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience because it was like a fashion show that we were just in a kind of confined place, but a big place, but a confined place. Nobody else there, and it was so some hanboks and dresses and not even dresses that we hadn't seen before, or some styles. Do you say? Yeah. Would you say?
Yeah, various different styles, both traditional and modern, actually, or modernized versions of hanbok. Some of them even look like pajamas to me. I mean, you can see. Yeah, that's right. You may see some videos that I posted if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, and we might even post some others on our Not So Korean podcast Instagram or Facebook or Facebook. So keep a lookout for anything else.
So I mean that project is for the upcoming Kingston Korea Festival.
Yeah,
right?
Chuseok. But yes, it's there's a few different things. You might recall from another episode we talked about the rice video.
Making Korean rice.
Yep, it was making and tasting, and I'm just to lead on from what you've just been saying, Tim, is I've actually been editing what we were filming recently, so I've been non-stop with that. Right. That's what I've been up to, as well as meeting people from the KBC, and obviously you've been liaising with them as well. Right. I mean, otherwise,
how's the editing going for that?
Yeah, it's actually, I thought it's only, I'm not going to give too much away now, but it's only a few minutes we're editing, but that sometimes makes it worse. And collaborating with the person from the KBC, it's actually made it better because we're meeting up to once we've edited, we're meeting up to kind of see how it's going and what she prefers and how it can look better or how it can sound better. I think it's going well. The deadline for that is pretty much today. So
that's great. So we look forward to seeing that very soon, and we will be also shooting some more films for them in the future, the KBCE.
Yeah, we'll go into that in more details. Yeah. There's stuff relating to food and other things, so it's going to be interesting. By the way, I will say this episode is going to be slightly different from other ones because we're including an interview. But before we do that, I think we've both covered pretty much what we've been up to. Just a few things to mention. People we know and some comments that we've received from the last episode. So I don't know if you want to talk about the Ansan thing.
I mean, last week we mentioned about Ansan, who is a Olympic archer from South Korea. Yeah. A young woman, and she happens to have a short haircut, so a lot of anti-feminists were basically bullying her on the internet. saying that she must be a feminist because of her short hair, which is quite ridiculous. But
Yeah.
anyway, we received a comment about this from a good friend of ours named Jong-chan Lee, or Jonathan Lee.
Yeah, and this was on our YouTube channel as opposed to
on the
Instagram.
YouTube channel. It's technically Jason's YouTube channel at the moment, but we may make our own YouTube channel at some point.
Yeah, he had some good words to say.
Yeah, do you want to read his comment?
Yeah, he's actually he's aware of this. He's actually a frequent commenter actually on our podcast episodes, but which is nice of him. He's really good, really good person.
Yeah.
He was saying, he said, "Thank you for the amazing interviews. They were the snippets of Dami and Dia last week, one of which you're going to hear this week for the full interview." Then he goes on to say, as a Korean composer who studied Western classical music in England and in America, and traditional Korean music at Seoul National University, SNU, I'm more than excited about the next episode. This episode. And he said, well done. But then he went on to talk about what Tim just mentioned, which was the young Korean men who lashed out at this athlete, Ansang. Obviously they should be, and they are, a national disgrace, and linked to an alt-right group called ILBE or ILBE.
Yeah.
They're really notorious for these sort of evil ideas and deeds, and a lot of Korean men, not to speak of not to mention women, lent support to Aung San. So that was.
Yeah, I think he just wanted to point out the fact that it's not like it's not the majority of Korean men who are attacking her.
That's right. Yeah.
She is getting a lot of support. It's just that a few men from this group, Ilbae, which is a far right wing or alt-right group in Korea, who have strong anti-feminist views, that these men were attacking her. So we just need to be aware that this group is out there and what they're doing and that kind of things they're saying. But at the same time, just realize that a lot of Korean people do support Aung San.
It's not. It's not.
We're not trying to make it out like every Korean man is against her or something. No,
that's definitely not it. No. There is more to the comment. There's another sentence or two, but we'll if you want to read that, you can go over to the YouTube channel. Incidentally, if as I say, we might change this to the podcast one, but it's currently youtube.com/Jason Verney. That's me, of course.
Yeah, well, speaking of the Olympics, maybe I could mention also that the Tokyo Olympics finished this past Sunday. Yeah. And, I wasn't too impressed, personally, with the opening and closing ceremonies. I don't know if you saw them or not, but... Oh,
I didn't know, but I heard about them.
So, actually, I went back and watched the 1988 Seoul Summer Olympic opening and closing ceremonies, and I found those much more interesting. I mean, they really made a huge production of it, and they infused a lot of traditional Korean culture into it, like a lot of... historical things and ceremonies, traditional ceremonies and things. And the music was really good, too. I think I sent you the official Olympic song from the 88 Olympics.
Yeah, I think it was a two-part song or something, wasn't it? It had
there's an English version and a Korean version. Yeah. And the Korean version is by a group called Koreatown.
Yes, that's it. I got the video.
And the song was actually produced by Giorgio Moroder.
Yes, I see that. So I couldn't believe it, actually.
Producer, and I believe he's also an artist, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, he does a lot of stuff for films, but I couldn't believe it because when I heard the song, it didn't sound like his kind of style. But then when I heard that bit later on, I could hear the electronics or whatever that he would be maybe associated with. Yeah, that was. Of course, I do remember.
You remember the 88 Olympics?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think actually, I do remember them. I'm not going to give away my age. I can do, but I don't think you probably were.
Yeah, I was only like a few years old when it happened, but my mother, she says she remembers watching it at the time. Yeah. And she just remembers that at the time she thought it seemed so exotic, and that Korea felt like such a far away or distant country to her. But now Korea's come into the news so much so over the decades.
It's
since then, and she knows so much more about it now that she could never believe that that she would get to know so much more about Korea, since that time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember also I was into just to swerve off topic a little bit. I remember there's a famous Erasure song, A Little Respect.
Yeah.
It's from 1988, I think, and I was really into them. And there was one of their videos. They sort of mess around with wordplay, and one of them is like Seoul, and they hold up this. They show the Olympic sort of the rings, and it was from the Seoul Olympics. So, it was very. That music was really interesting. But I know you mentioned that Imcontech and documentary and.
Yes, it's called Hand in Hand.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, Hand in Hand.
It's named after the official Olympic song, which has the same title. Hand in Hand, and the film was directed by E.G. Won, but I don't think it's a very famous director, but there were actually 3 official Olympic films that were made of the 88 Olympics.
You were saying
one of them was by Im Kwon-taek, a very famous Korean director.
Yeah, we've actually, or were you there? I've actually took part in a group interview. I've taken part in a group interview in 2012.
Well, I think I was a volunteer during the time he was.
Was he here?
He was here
for a
retrospective of his films.
Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah. So.
And that was really interesting.
Yeah, and coincidentally, that was the London Olympics.
Yes, right. 2012,
So that was all happening that year.
Right, yeah.
Well, so we've kind of turned things around a little bit in this episode, but we've got a couple of other bits of news to mention at the end of this podcast. Well, what we're going to do next is to literally let Dami Eniola speak for herself, because we would introduce her, but she does a great job of that.
Yeah.
You might remember last week we played a snippet and of Dear as well. And Dear is coming. We're hoping to have that next week, next week's show. But we probably now go into we basically had to clean up the audio a little bit. So apologies if it's not 100% perfect. But I think we should go into that now. What about any last words?
If anyone needs to know more about Dami, you can listen to our last week's podcast, the episode that we did last week, where we talked more about her, and she also introduced herself a little bit in one of the clips.
Yeah.
But you may hear that again today.
And
we will also leave some information about her in the description.
Yep. And also, if you go to the website gugaksound.com, that's Gugak Sound, so it's Gugak sound.com. That's where you can find more of her, more things that she's been involved with. She's also knows Gugak Sounds with an S on the end on Instagram and other places. So I think that's probably it. Let's listen to Dami talking to us.
My name is Dami, and I'm a music composer. I got into Korean music, roughly about 10 years now. Yeah. And I've played lots of Korean traditional music instruments. I'm very interested in Korean traditional music, and I played lots of Korean traditional music instruments. I've had the opportunity to perform on various stages with very famous people as well, which has been a blessing, and I'm grateful for. I currently am studying at Seoul National University, doing a master's in Korean traditional music composition.
Okay, thanks very much for that. The other question I had for you, which is kind of leading on from what you just said, was your passion for Korean music itself. Do you have a date of when that kind of happened?
Yeah, sure. It's quite funny because before the music obviously came the language, and before the language came the TV shows. And so I remember I was watching a very famous one, which is a very historical drama. I don't know if most people know about it now. It's called Jumong, and it was about 80 episodes or so. And throughout the story, I was really obsessed with the sounds that came out, the sounds that were used, the music sound. And I was very curious about what instrument was being played. And so from there, I realized that it was the gaegum. And in some of them were the percussion instrument, which is the jangu. So I basically went in search of anyone in England, basically, who taught the instrument and went, I want to learn that, yeah.
Okay, thanks. And you just mentioned the language, which I know that you can speak it, but would you say you are fluent? Or would you say you are the next stage down?
I would say fluent, but I'm slightly rusty now. But when you mean next stage, in a way, yes, because if I was sitting in a group of Korean people, whenever they make jokes, I can easily catch on to whatever they're saying. I'm very familiar with accents and just general daily life, the way people speak, really.
Okay, we've known each other for several years, but I last met you before the pandemic and before all this happened. But we met in Korea, and you were studying at SNU, Seoul National University. You are going back there?
Yes.
But first of all, is there something particular thing you miss from that university life, and how does it compare to SOAS or any university life you've experienced here?
To be honest, while I was in SNU, I wouldn't lie, I did really miss SOAS a lot, because I discovered that even though it was supposed to be a school on Korean traditional music, I discovered that Korea is very traditional in the way they do things. And so because of that, the students' ability to kind of be different is not really appreciated, to be honest.
Okay.
So in some ways they felt like machines to me. So it's like push play and they'd go on and do these things.
Okay.
And apart from like just my tutor, who was like my composition teacher, I won't lie, I didn't really miss much of it. And my friends, I made a couple of friends.
That's
apart
good.
from that, really much.
When I was there with you very briefly, it was only briefly one sort of afternoon, but you introduced me to some you'd met then. They were clearly not just fellow students, they were obviously more than that, friends, which is really nice. Obviously there's a lot of differences between a UK university and British one, but what would you say, a Korean one and a British one, but what would be the biggest difference, do you think? I mean, you said that they were quite maybe stricter.
I wouldn't say stricter. I think it's because of the culture. And I think one of the things that's missing from the universities is self-expression. So I would sit down in a class and I noticed that everybody in the class had to accept whatever the teacher was saying. You can't really challenge the teacher or ask questions. She says that's that, and that's all. And there were times where I wanted to go like that. And, the fact that everybody looked at me weird already was like, okay, I don't want to kind of stand out. The only time I discovered I was able to do that was every now and again they had international scholars, so people from Switzerland, people from France who came to talk about music. And so they'd come and speak to the students and they'd go, any questions? And the students would be like, no. And I'm like, excuse me? And I start asking them so much questions. In fact, the actual professors became afraid of me because I was just like, so, could you explain this? Could you do this? And it's like, and all the students are like, why is she talking?
I can imagine.
So.
Okay,
Totally different. Totally different.
Cool. One question I thought about earlier was we talked about before the podcast, but you had the Gugak Sounds sort of radio show, and I wondered because it was quite well known. It got got spread by London Korean Links and other places and the university, I guess. But basically, I wondered how it came about. Was it that there was? I thought maybe there was equipment somewhere and you just had access, or
it was very interesting. It actually came about from the ignorance of the Korean Cultural Center.
Oh right, did it?
Very interesting because I was supposed to be performing and a TV show was supposed to be recording. And I remember I was supposed to be recording with Anna, who's a pansori singer. And we asked them for a pansori book. And a pansori book weighs a lot.
Right.
We each had one, but we didn't want to drag it all the way from SOAS to the center. And so we said to them, do you have a Pansori book? And they said, oh, no problem. We do have one. Right. It's readily there. And we got there ready for filming, and we're like, oh, where's the Pansori book? And you're like, here. And we're like, this is a wee bit light. And opened it and discovered it was a Salmonori book. And yes.
Oh, right, okay.
And I'm like, how is it that the Korean Cultural Center doesn't know the difference between a Pansori book and a Salmonori book? And they're from Korea. And what are they teaching at the center? Yeah. And so I started to talk to other people, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't know the difference because we don't understand the music. And I thought, well, I was at that stage in my life at one point where I didn't understand it, and I had to do so much studying. And I was like, well, not everybody would like to be a composer and know about this like I would, but they'd still like to have some understanding. There's one thing I don't like as a composer, even now, even in classical music, is a composer writing a piece of music and just anybody listening to it and going, I don't know if it's good or bad. It just sounds something. If you say it's good, then it's good, and I just think it's not fair. And so I always want to break things down to people, and I think that encouraged me to actually go through that process of doing that show so people can easily understand the music without having to go through all the materials I've read, basically.
Okay, that was a very insightful, concise explanation. Thanks for that. Okay, I'll just do at least one more. Probably.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So we've known each other a while, but when I recorded your concert way back in, was it 2013? You did your performance, and I videoed that. Was that what year was that?
That was 2015.
15. Okay, yeah, 2015. But you've come a long way, I feel. But you recently had, just before the pandemic, you had that collaboration with the art and the art and the music collaboration, which in London. Can you just tell me a bit about that? As in, how did that come about? It was collaboration and.
So it wasn't really a collaboration. It was my solo concert first of all. Right. So I was the one who wrote all the music for the events. No, that's okay. And did all I did all the artwork as well myself.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So that show actually was me telling my experience in Korea, because as at the time I was in Korea, I'd gone through quite a huge experience, and I felt like I needed a way to actually let it all out.
Yep.
And so those were actually let out through the artworks, which I did. But then not only that, the music was replying to the artwork, so they were inspired by how I felt. So each piece actually went through a certain emotion.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, emotion. And I chose several instruments to represent that emotion, and just how they blended together. So it was like the group playing was myself.
Yep.
And each instrument represented my feelings.
Okay, that's really good.
Yeah.
When you go back to Korea, you've only just recently found that out, that you can go back, and the process is quite difficult, the visa and stuff. But when you do go back, what will you achieve in that time back at university, and what do you hope to achieve? Sorry.
This time around, I'm actually going back with a different kind of mindset than when I went the first time. So the first time was a mindset of I wanted to know more about Korean traditional music. I wasn't too sure as a musician where I wanted to be, because yes, I had performed and done this, which I'm grateful for having that opportunity. But then over the last years, I've been kind of studying, and I discovered that I actually like making music more than performing. So it's going back in mind with being a composer. Now, going back with that in mind, I intend to actually focus on my writing and one of the things I'm vastly interested in, which is very weird, another side of Korean traditional music, is I'm really interested in how Korean traditional music affects the brain. And so I'm going there with that in mind to research that in my writing, to find out how Korean instruments do affect, because I think this is something that hasn't been really studied. And I think it would be a great way to find out more about Korean music and how they affect people emotionally, because I intend to write music for films as well and using these instruments, and I want to know what kind of emotion they'll bring to the table, really.
That sounds really
portray.
Interesting.
Apart from that, I think you would. I haven't actually mentioned.
Okay.
I've been given a grant by the Art Council.
Oh, very good.
To write an orchestral piece for the Taegum and the Western Orchestra.
Wow, so that's
So that's a very big project I'm going back to complete.
So that's almost the main reason then. It's got to surround. Right.
Yeah, because my Taegum player is in Korea, so I have to work with her from there. Yes.
Okay. I will have one more question, which is not related to your music.
Okay.
It's more about Korea and what you. Is there certain things you miss about the lifestyle over there, or particular things, or did you find it the culture was difficult to adapt to, and when you go back,
Okay, I would say the only thing I found difficult there was being a person of color.
Yeah.
Which I am everywhere I go in the world. It was very interesting and sometimes irritating to see how much attention I got, especially just getting on the tube and sitting down the train. I just felt like a monkey in a zoo sometimes.
What was that?
Literally, a monkey in a zoo.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah. But apart from that, I absolutely love the healthcare in Korea. It's so fast. The doctors are really good. They actually care, because I remember each time I was given a medication, they already had it on the system that I had stomach ulcer.
Okay.
And they always gave me something to protect my stomach. And when it didn't work, they always changed my medication almost immediately. The hospitals were very beautiful. And obviously NHS has got nothing on that.
I know.
The people were very friendly, especially the older ones, because with their curiosity, for some reason, they seem to have the confidence to open their mouth to actually talk to me rather than just stare at me.
What are you talking about? Sorry, the older Koreans or the older doctors? Oh, I thought you were talking
the older Koreans.
Okay,
so,
in general. Okay.
Yes. So they spoke to me. I did have experiences where I was stopped for almost half an hour, engaged in a conversation with a woman who I had no idea why, but she just wanted to talk to me.
That's fine.
The younger people, they were obviously they traveled out quite a lot, so it was like it didn't mean anything to them. It's just fast and paced. Korean traditional music department in my university was another difficult one, because they weren't used to seeing a Western person. It's Korean traditional music. What Western person would you see? The classical side were used to it, but the Korean traditional side wasn't used to. So each time I'd walk along the corridor, sometimes students would come out of their classes just to see me, and it was like, okay, now go to your class. And some of them tried saying hello and speaking weird English, and I was like, okay.
That's a bit, But that doesn't put you, obviously when you go back, it doesn't put you off going back there.
No, I just ignore it. I just look at them, smile, and just walk past.
Yeah.
What can I do?
And it's good to be different in a place anyway.
Yeah, you just smile and just go. What can you say, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but apart from that, and just everything's just so fast there.
Yeah.
I did lose my patience when I came back to London, occasionally, especially at the doctors, because I was like, my appointment is this time, where are you?
But I think the government works differently with the healthcare there. But what about the cost? You talked about the healthcare, but what about the cost of the healthcare? Is that more expensive?
The healthcare was actually quite good, because I did not have insurance.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And I did get insurance, but I just couldn't bother to claim the money back. But even at that amount, like compared to what we have to pay in the UK, it's for medication. It was like to see the doctor and medication would not even cost the same price of a medication from like NHS. Yeah. So it was really good.
Okay, that's good. Well, we'll leave it there. Maybe we'll do another, when you're in Korea, maybe we'll do an interview with you or something then. But I think that's it for now. Thanks for your time, and we'll see how this audio comes out as well. We'll do our mixing. So that was my interview with Dami.
Yeah, and I found it really interesting, Jason. So thank you for doing that.
No problem.
That's
our job.
You'll hear my interview with Dia next week, but Jason did the one with Dami. So I found it particularly interesting what Dami said about the comparison between the universities that she studied at, and also the sort of, I don't know if I can call it racism or
nationalism, maybe
nationalism, discrimination that she experienced in Korea. And I mean, that's a whole subject we could get into but that would take up a whole nother episode, I think. But if people want to talk about this issue or anything that she talked about in her interview, please contact us through social media, leave some comments for us, or any engagement that we could get about this would be great, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it more in going forward.
I even after the interview, I spoke to Dami about some really interesting topics which weren't covered, and we're going to hopefully do an interview in the future, probably a longer one, talking up all kinds of things, either retouching on what we've just spoken about, what she's brought to light to us, or new things such as more info on Korean music or classical music, or her opinions on K-pop or that kind of thing.
I look forward to that as well. So
I hope it'll be good.
I mean, speaking of interviews, we have another one coming up soon that we're going to be doing with Hanguk Hapa, who we mentioned on previous episodes. And she's a really interesting person as well. I mean, she's doing so much for the Korean community as well, including Korean food and Korean music and all kinds of different things.
She was actually with the hanbok stuff we did.
She was one of the models there too, so that was great. I mean, she's an amazing woman. So just
to remind you as well, her name is, it's, in case it doesn't sound through audio, it's Hanguk, and then it's Hapa.
Yeah, or Becky. You can call her Becky. So she will be coming up, and then we've already recorded the interview with Dia, which will be coming next week.
Yep, of course, some audio things to do with it. But
so and you have a couple more things to tell us, Jason?
Just to sort of close the show, really. Talking about people we've collaborated with Hangul Papa and Dia in the past as well. We have Paul Quinn, who runs the website Hangul Celluloid. He's probably, personally, he's someone who I've known for about a decade, and his website, hangulcelluloid.com, has lots of brilliant reviews and interviews regarding Korean cinema, and he's got an event coming up in August, so not long, August the 24th, and it's called Off the Wall, and it's Korean movies outside of the mainstream. And essentially, there's an event. It's a free event. It's a Zoom call, a live Zoom call, and you can find it on Eventbrite. It's hosted by British Korean Society, which used to be the Anglo-Korean Society, but now it's the British Korean Society. And so I think he's going to talk about the different genres in Korean films, the more classic Korean films. Sorry, not classic as in the old classics, but more sort of in the 90s and 2000s, and not trying to, I suppose, dispel the myths that it's all Korean films are violent, which they're not. Some of the ones that get in the mainstream are, but yes, he's done sort of talks elsewhere before, and he's done intros and sort of speeches and talks again at the Korean Cultural Centre, UK. So we're looking forward to that. I'm definitely going to be attending. The event is sponsored by, it seems, Asiana Airlines, Samsung and others. But yeah, I mean, were you tuning into that? I've already got my ticket.
Yeah, sounds really good. I mean, Paul Quinn has been around for, well, quite a while, but
in the nicest way.
I mean, he's been involved with Korean cinema for quite a while, and we did some group interviews with him.
That's right.
About 8 years ago in London with some famous
Chae
Korean
Min-sik,
actors and directors.
And Moon So-ri, for example. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that because he's doing well. His website's good. Hangul Celluloid. Yeah. One other thing, which is not really my kind of some news someone handed to us or we spotted not long before coming on air, was that there's I say it's not my thing because I'm not really a massive football fan, but there was a female footballer, Cho So-hyun, and she's apparently a midfielder. So yeah, you can explain that to me another time. But she's been doing well. Well, sorry, she's joined basically Tottenham Hotspur team. So a little bit of Korean news in the UK there. Sports, seeing as we talked about sports before.
That's the women's team, right?
Yeah, sorry, I should say that. I don't know. They should really have a mixed team. I don't know, but. But seeing as we were talking about,
we're not quite there yet, unfortunately.
No, we've got a long way to go yet. Maybe I would say even more so in Korea, but maybe not. Maybe everywhere.
Right.
So I think that's it. I mean, that we've covered everything there. I hope you enjoyed Dami's interview. There's some serious subjects there and some less serious subjects. We'll close out the episode with the music from Kaya. That's New Arirang. And from their album Korean Breeze. It's what we've been using for the last few episodes. And I hope you enjoyed that. Find us on social media if you haven't already.
Thanks everyone, and 안녕히.
Thanks a lot. 계세요.